and welcome to another We Are Developers Live. It's Wednesday again. We looked at the bar going there, and before it actually ended, it turns to the other screen. So I'm confused about this every single time. But what can you do? This is interfaces and this is UX. So let's play with that and debug it. I'm here with Dan Cranny. He's our developer relations person in the UK, and I'm the VP of Developer Relations at We Are Developers. And yeah, it's summery. It's nice. I have my window open, so hopefully the neighbors won't be too loud. But yeah, how do you do? How do you do, Greg? Dan, what's on your end?
Yeah, very well. Very well. Good to be back here again. I mean, you say it's summery. I know we've said, I think yesterday you even said to me, Dan, stop telling me every day it's sunny, and it's not today. So, it's kind of, very on brand for the UK to just be very, very rainy and a bit grey. But anyway, it's good to be back here. I'm looking forward to today.
Well, summer's over, so that's basically that in the UK right now. And today we got somebody here who I'm very excited that actually managed to give us some time, because he's super busy doing his own live stuff on other platforms and all kind of information, talking at conferences. So today our guest is Tejas Kumar. How are you doing, Tejas?
Hey, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well. The sun is shining, and I'm wondering what I'm doing indoors, but it's good to be here.
Because outside it's glaring on your screen and you can't read things, and when you're coding, that's the biggest problem, I guess.
Probably, yeah. That's probably what it is.
Yeah. So you've been busy. You're a top-selling book author of React books. Is that right? Is that still top-selling, or has somebody taken the crown from you?
That's a good question. I don't know, because I don't check every day if I'm top-selling. But it was at one point, and just one React book. It's called Fluent React. I have it here. But the cool thing is, it's I'm getting off camera because I'm reaching. But this book I just found out was recently translated into Korean.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's wild. Cool. Like my words in Korean. So I think it must be selling well in Asia or something. But yeah, I keep getting copies of this book in different languages, and I go like, whoa, I did that. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting journey.
It's a bit like when you publish things on the web, and out of a sudden somebody proposes to translate it into Chinese and put it on a news portal there, and you're like, okay, I can trust the translation, I guess, but it's interesting when you get that kind of reach, and these things are coming around right now. Now you shifted away from the React world a bit towards the thing that I think somebody talked about the other day. Oh yeah, AI. Yeah. So what's your big thing there? What drives you most in the AI world right now? What do you think is the most exciting bit at the moment?
At the moment, the most exciting thing is Model Context Protocol, or MCP, which is a standardized way for any vendor with an API to share interactivity with that API with an AI application that uses some type of LLM. And so think, for example, Slack, right, could expose a Model Context Protocol server, and then you, with either Cursor or ChatGPT, whatever it may be, you just say, hey, give me a summary of what happened in my Slack. Give me a summary of my unreads from yesterday. And your AI application will do that for you. Okay, what's an urgent Slack message? And your assistants get more capabilities because of MCP, because of Model Context Protocol. So Slack actually does have a MCP server, and any client application can connect to it. But there's, I work for a database company. I work for a many software product company, and we also have a database now that you could just operate with an AI assistant. So you can talk to ChatGPT or Cursor or Claude and just say, hey, who's the top performing employee in my employees table in my database? And it will just get you a list of names. Or if it doesn't know what top performing means, it will ask you or it will guess. And it'll say, what do you mean by top performing? Do you mean salespeople who have closed the most contracts? Do you mean engineers who have committed the most features? What do you mean? And if it doesn't know, it will ask you. If it just knows you from context, it will guess. And you can always interrupt it as the human in the loop and say, no, I meant top performing like this. And you just talk, and it operates your database. It does all the queries, the filters, whatever, and gives you back data. So MCP enables incredible things. I mean, you could think of a travel website saying, you just send ChatGPT or a similar client a message saying, hey, I need to be in Bucharest or London tomorrow at night, and I want to pay $200, and it will just find you your flight, right? So MCP for sure, I think, is the thing that's the most trendy right now.
But there are, of course, problems with it as well. Like Simon Willison just had a blog post about code injection in MCP. What I like about it, it's a standard that is emerging to a degree. Like one company started with it and more are jumping on it right now. So rather than like having to deal with like lots of different standards and ideas, we can actually concentrate on making that thing secure and making that thing happen.
Exactly. And you know, Chris, your background is browsers, and browsers also had emerging standards a long time, 20 plus years ago. And there was things like the browser wars and arguments about why do we need such specification and so on. And it's so cool to see that we've learned from those arguments that now so early into AI, we're already coming up with standardization that prevents things like browser wars and protocol wars. So yeah, I think that parallel is pretty profound, because some are saying, I don't know if I fully agree with this, but some are saying we won't even need browsers anymore, and we don't need web pages anymore, and so on. I don't have a strong opinion there, but I think if there's truth to that, standardization helps a lot, like it did with browsers. So
I mean, I keep saying, like, having worked on browsers and having worked in operating systems, they start merging more and more. Like the browsers are actually in the background. They're not actually the thing that you click on to go online. You already are online. Most of the OSs nowadays don't work offline anymore, or not properly. And so this kind of boundary has been broken quite some time ago. It's an interesting idea though, where how users will start embracing that, seeing how digitization in some countries or gets slower than others. It's just like an app is still an amazing thing for some governments, for example. So like having an AI MCP, whatever connectivity thing in there for them might be a different story altogether. But yeah, this Friday, we're going to have an edition of the newsletter of the Dev Digest, the WeAreDevelopers Dev Digest, that actually has the MCP article that I talked about from Simon Willison, and also somebody ranting about what's everything that's wrong about MCP. And at the same time, you get some tools how to use your own MCP server inside Copilot in GitHub, and a few other tools that actually manage to play with them and set them up. But let's take a look at some of the other things that I put together. We don't have to go through all of them this time, because there might be not enough time for it. But one thing that really shocked me today is that, like, with the government in the US cutting funding for like all kind of programs, the MITRE-backed cyber vulnerability program, the CVE program, is getting lost funding today. Wow. And that is really, really scary. That really makes me wonder, like, what we can do about this. And I hope there's going to be a way to not make that a commercial thing and still actually make it a government or like publicly funded thing. So, because I mean, in case you don't know, CVE is where basically all the vulnerabilities of every software product are actually recorded, discussed, and actually openly explained why they are security problems and how to fix them. So if that one goes away, we're going to have a real issue. And I'm not saying that this is an infallible government doing something wrong. I'm just saying, like, this is just one of the cuts that actually are pretty scary to think about, because, I mean, I don't know, am I a freak for reading CVE papers, or do you also look into them, Theas?
I think I don't look, well, I look into them when the situation calls for it. For example, Vercel recently had some issues, as you may have seen. So that I look into because I deploy on Vercel, and not just me, but a lot of my peers. Depends on the situation, but those are, I completely understand the value of them. And I think it's important to draw maybe not the wrong conclusion here, yeah? Because like they're losing funding, but they're not stopping, although this may make them stop. And so I think all is not lost, I guess, is what I would say to this article. And hopefully something can be salvaged if, say, some other benefactor steps in to preserve the funding, wherever it might come from. So,
yeah, but it's an interesting thing that kind of went under the radar, and out of a sudden, like, poof, it's gone. You know, like, that is really weird.
Similar to the Wayback Machine that happened some time ago, right?
Yeah. Another thing that I just put in is slop spotting, which is a new thing that just a new name for something. So what that one means is you have a supply chain attack that when you have generative AI tools creating code, they generate packages and package names and pull them immediately from a code resource. And when they start hallucinating, they come up with package names that don't exist. So what people did is like look at the hallucinations of the things and then generate malware packages that they put into repositories, and that get automatically then included in your vibe coding idea thing. So it basically shows like how many hallucination rates the different models have in Python and in JavaScript, and it actually shows you how the whole package repository attack is happening right now. This is nothing new. I mean, we had typo squatting in domains for a long time. There was a PayPal domain where the A was the Russian A and not like the Arabic one, not the Latin one. And that was basically looked like PayPal, felt like PayPal, but your data got completely lost and funded whatever.
Yeah.
And then we had the same with NPM packages as well. There was typos in NPM packages that already got pulled in when people had typos in their CI/CD. But this is a different level to a degree, because I think there's a lack of transparency when you actually get the machine to generate your code and pull the dependencies. So what is your stance on that?
We just have to be vigilant. I think a couple of things. One, I think we have to be vigilant. We can't, like, vibe coding. I posted just now on X that vibe coding is a nightmare. It really is. Like, it's worse than dealing with somebody who is inexperienced, because if it's a person who's inexperienced, you can at least like talk to them in the flesh and mentor them. They're like, bad LLM responses when vibe coding is worse than it's unmentorable, right? And so it's very difficult. And so I think it's just important to pay close attention to the generated output, the slop, so to speak, and to be vigilant and not complacent in this case, because they cannot be trusted at this point in time. I also think that this is one of those moments where, the EU gets a lot of flack for over-regulation, but requiring SBOMs, or software bill of materials, is so valuable here, because it requires that vigilance that we talked about earlier, and it almost legally enforces it. So I think there's definitely a cause for vigilance here, and organizations need to consider how they can make their employees more vigilant in the workplace, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it boils down to vibe coding is great for doing like prototypes, for doing like ideas, for playing with something. But like when your main product is actually built that way, I don't see that happening anytime soon. And I don't see it not necessarily because it isn't possible. I just see it as you said, it is scary as hell, because the machines always give the happy path. They also want to please all the time. So that's why they come up with hallucinations and random things. And then when they generate these package calls and they got called in, maybe it's also on the repositories of the code repository to actually find a way. Like if that one gets more out of hand, and it can easily, because that stuff multiplies much faster than humans do, then we might have to take a look at like NPM and all the other places and see what security options are in place there, or if it's just maybe too permissive.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think ultimately it just comes down to you can't trust vibe coding, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you can't trust code. I mean, period. I mean, there's like, I mean, yesterday I saw another post where somebody was discussing how to do JSON without commas. And because it's so horrible that JSON has commas in it, and then basically we should do just line spaces or white space as a delimiter and these kind of things. And I'm like, really, why do we have to really question, like, I mean, when I write text, I put a full stop at the end of each sentence.
Yeah.
Sometimes a semicolon. But basically it shows me that this instruction is done.
Yeah.
So it's not really that much hard work to do it, and it makes it much easier to parse, much safer to convert, rather than having to hope for the right white space. But I don't know.
Yeah,
it's an interesting bit.
I think honestly that's the reason CoffeeScript died, in my opinion. You remember CoffeeScript?
Yeah.
It was tabs. It was white space sensitive, and I can't. Yeah.
Yeah, but so is Python.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the fastest growing language out there right now. So, I mean, yeah, this is an interesting one. Like you shifting over to AI more. Are you actually getting more versed in Python, or do you still live in the TypeScript world?
No. This is actually a common misconception that AI engineering requires Python. And this comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of what AI engineering is, which I would love to clarify, where AI engineering doesn't require training models. It doesn't require doing machine learning work. They are distinct disciplines. And this comes, by the way, from Andrej Karpathy, co-founder of OpenAI, where you don't need to train anything. The application of machine learning is AI engineering. And so how do you apply machine learning? You talk to models. You use JavaScript fetch, and you just do inference over an API, right? And so Python is not mandatory to know if you want to be an AI engineer. Let's not be that gatekeepy. You just bring whatever language you want. If it has a network layer, then make a request to a language model or any model and use that to solve problems. That is literally engineering, is problem solving, and AI engineering is using AI to that end. So yeah, I do write some Python occasionally if I want to like do machine learning work, and I do machine learning work. Like I will train my own models here and there. But for like consumer AI application, if I want to build you a chatbot or something like this, I will never use Python for that.
Well, it's a bit like you can do a 3D game without knowing OpenGL.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Or like basically any GTK or all kind of graphics software, and writing directly to the machine. You're actually using library on top of library on top of library, and that, yeah. I mean, I post on social media that I said like the sentence "you're not a professional developer if you're not" is the same as "I'm not a racist," but because there's nothing good coming after that sentence. Like it's either gatekeeping, as you said, or it's just trying to sell you some content that actually is making you a perfect professional developer, which is also not the thing that happens. It's an interesting world right now where people are seeing themselves as like professional, but we have to think about that. I think we have to start thinking about, like, in terms of career, what does it mean to be on which level right now? And these levels have changed a lot since we generate a lot of code with AI rather than like writing it by hand.
Yeah, I think your statement, and I did see that on social media. I thought that was very interesting because professional is a gate-kept term in general, right? It means you're getting paid to do something. That's what at least that's what it used to mean. Like as as an employed professional, that's what. So if you're like coding as a hobby, or some would say as an amateur, people think amateur is a bad word, but amateur literally, it comes from amore. It comes from love. Amateurs do what they do because they love it. It comes from the love of the craft. And so if you're not employed, but you love coding and you're an amateur developer, I don't know that that's a bad thing, as people might assume. But I don't know, like about professional developer, I wonder if there is an element of gatekeeping there, rightfully so, because professional means you get paid to do it. You know what I mean? Like I am a developer. I think that you can't ever gatekeep, because who are you to say? But professional, I don't know. I would love your thoughts on that.
I feel it's a little bit like the word blogger. It made me think about the word journalist kind of changed. When everybody could blog and everybody could put things online, it meant there was this real kind of identity crisis amongst journalists. In saying, well, what's the difference between us and bloggers? And I think the general consensus was, well, journalists will understand the ethical considerations they have to make before they go and publish a story. So you might map that onto development as somebody who, like you were saying then, Chris, understands that if I import this package, there's security concern I have to mitigate, rather than just, well, I've imported the package and now I've got the feature I wanted, therefore I'm a developer. So I can understand that. Maybe the gatekeeping in that respect isn't the worst thing in the world. It's about protecting people to some degree.
I think the problem with your focus on like you get paid to do it. I mean, I got paid to write JavaScript for 5 years before I wrote my book, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was just happy it didn't break. And then I wrote the book, and then I couldn't fake it any longer and actually looked into it. So in my case, I think the gatekeeping idea would be, you're professional if you know what you're doing and what the impact of it is. Like if you're just using things and you're happy with the outcome and you're concentrating on the shiny outcome, then you might get paid for that, but you're still not a professional developer to me. Like,
right.
So that's the thing that might be. That's why when I interviewed people at Yahoo, for example, we asked them to build a website for us that was a PSD, and we didn't even look too much into how they coded it, but they actually asked them why they chose to do it in a certain way. We asked them to explain to us why they solved that problem in that regard, and that actually showed me much more if that person is a professional or not. because it's just saying like, oh, I made it work is kind of not good enough.
Right. And so you were interested more in the thought process that would lead to the outcome as opposed to just the outcome.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing that, like, we talked earlier about that spacewalk right now with Katy Perry. I mean, later on, I'm changing my tires of my car, so I'm going to go to the basement, get the tires out, and drive to the garage and get the car changed. Should I tweet afterwards? Now I know how it feels like to be a mechanic. Because I just brought the tires there. Like, it feels like there's a lot of people that actually are just passengers along the ride and actually see themselves as professionals. And that's just unfair to the people that put a lot of effort in and put a lot of things in. I mean, we talked about this before the show. I'm actually more excited about the Indian space program that managed to land on the south pole of the moon. And that was like 80% women in the ground team there. And nobody has headlines about this for some reason. It's really weird.
Yeah. That is very strange. I didn't even know about that. That's how strange it is.
Now, Google had its like big next conference, and the big thing that they announced there is the Ironwood TPUs, and basically it says that it changes the biggest hidden cost of AI. Now, inference is supposed to be the huge hidden cost of AI. Can you explain to us what inference is?
Yeah, inference is speaking to a model. It's giving input tokens and getting output tokens. As far as I know, it's literally performing semantically the word inference. That's what it means. You infer things, and when you send ChatGPT a prompt, hey, what's the weather today? Then the inference is the output of like this is the answer. To me, that's the most intuitive definition of this word, and I would love to be corrected, but that's what inference. So I think I don't understand why this is a hidden cost, because we pay by input tokens and output tokens per request. Yeah, so maybe there's something I'm missing there, but I don't see what's hidden about that cost.
Well, I think the cost is about training the model in itself. I guess that's why DeepSeek was such a difference to the others we had before, because it already had the inference in it, as far as I understood it. So that's why it actually could run much more efficient and could run on lower spec machines than all the other models before. But I mean, to take that away, I'm actually more annoyed about like hardware. Of course, hardware makes sense to have that in there, but there was already a mention that when it comes to AI engineering, that it actually becomes an elitist thing because you actually have to have fat machines to actually do it yourself. And when we now get to like, oh, you have to have that or that chipset before you can even do that, that made me stop doing game development. I couldn't be bothered buying new graphics cards all the time just to try out a new game. And it feels like that we're now shifting everything into hardware, on consumer hardware, server hardware, different story. I think that's an interesting. There will be an interesting battlefield of like who's going to be allowed to be an AI developer and more efficient than others.
Yeah, I kind of agree, but at the same time, AI is getting so commoditized that I hope that that's not true. I hope that through capitalism, and we hear a lot about the negative sides of capitalism, and indeed there are many, but there's also a positive where you have economies of scale, right? Meaning things get cheaper as they get done more and as more people consume them. And we can actually see that, like GPT-4o Mini is the cheapest model available from OpenAI. Even cheaper than 3.5 Turbo, even cheaper than a less capable model, just because of usage volume, among other things. So I think that's very, very interesting. About the hidden costs here, I get it finally. The thesis that says inference is a hidden cost, is a huge hidden cost, as it does in this article, is because a lot of researchers, and I don't personally think this way, that's why I didn't understand it, but like looking at the industry as a whole, a lot of people ascribe huge cost to training models. And indeed, it is super expensive. Like you need, as you mentioned, Chris, it's elitist. You need like very high quality hardware. In fact, GPT-3 was trained on a cluster of 8 highly expensive, highly capable GPUs. And wow, that he's searching. Anyway, Tekken. Anyway, so you need expensive GPUs, and you need time, right? You need training time, which is electricity over time. But it doesn't stop there. Once you get a trained model, it doesn't stop there, because then you have the cost of evals, which is making sure the outputs actually make sense. And all of this combines to an enormous figure. So then what makes inference, a huge hidden cost is that it grows more over time. With training, you train a model, it's super expensive, but when you have your final weights, those costs are done. Whereas the thesis here is inference is a huge hidden cost because you pay for it infinitely. You know what I mean? Like you never stop paying for inference because people keep performing inference. Users keep querying ChatGPT, but the training process has a definite end, whereas the inference stage or using the model has no definite end. People will use inference for the rest of maybe their lives, right? And so that's what they're saying here is a hidden cost.
I just searched that one because I found that one yesterday. This is a new model, Token 7B Instruct Commercial 0.4, and it's a European model, which basically has been trained mostly on European data, has pre-trained with 4 terabyte tokens and 7 billion whatever, and it's done by the Fraunhofer Institute. And I found that interesting that it actually supports all these languages. And that's a really, really... that will be interesting to get somebody from that on the show to talk about it a bit, because I find that a really interesting thing to actually have something that is very much Europe focused and still at that scale. Yeah. So it's an interesting one. So Hugging Face is always quite fun to just look around what's going on there. But I mean, I talked to Dan about this as well. Like I'm getting tired of models. Like I'm just getting like, there's a new one every day and I'm supposed to know about this. And then we have benchmarks, and then we learn that benchmarks have been played. And so how do you keep up? Or do you just basically take a seat back and say, like, let's wait a week and if it's really that exciting or not?
Yeah, I don't care. That's my answer. I really don't care. I'm more interested in solving problems than keeping up with some hype cycle. And so it took a long time for me to get even on Claude 3.7 Sonnet, which is Claude 3.5 Sonnet, but with thinking. And I thought, why is this necessary? In fact, the moment OpenAI announced GPT-01, which is its first reasoning model, honestly, a lot of this just smelled like... I'm trying to not swear, but it smelled like BS to me, including reasoning models, right? Because reasoning models themselves, you could just build one yourself using a cheap 3.5 Turbo or 4.0 Mini, where you just build a loop, a thought loop. Hey, think, generate, now reevaluate. Like you just do a while loop until some condition is satisfied. You've got a reasoning model. And the way reasoning models work under the hood are very similar, except they're more token efficient. Like the thoughts are not English words. They're more... tokens that the model can understand, but ultimately, like, it's not. And so unfortunately, because it's so new, there's a lot of like hype driven, hey, get that bag, the big red alert emoji, you need to pay attention to this or you're going to miss out. And my answer to all of this is I don't care. Like, show me actual value, show me problems that are being solved, and then we can start to care. I think another example of this is MCP, right? You may see a lot of people saying, hey, if you don't get MCP, you're going to miss out. And now I can say that that's true because I've built something myself. So my cycle is this. I see things in the news and I usually dismiss them until they come back like 3 or 4 times. And then I start paying attention. And if it's something that I can use as in get my hands dirty, the next step is, okay, let's just build something small to see if this works or not and how this works. And then I make a conclusion. So like you said, I see something a few times, I dismiss it. If it comes back enough times, then I'll pay attention. And then after attention is usually like, let's build something hands-on and make sure this is actually worth my time. I'll give you an example. DeepSeek, as you know, some weeks ago, took the entire world by storm. And I thought, okay, it showed up enough that I was like, let's try it. I ran it locally, the smaller model, and I was like, this is actually cool. It's open source and on par with OpenAI's closed source models. And then I looked at the biggest DeepSeek model possible, which has exactly, you're looking at Olama, exactly with Olama. You need to upgrade it. We found the biggest DeepSeek model, which is DeepSeek 671B, 671 billion parameters. That's roughly the same size as GPT-4. And again, this kind of model is not for pedestrian hardware. There is no one who can run this at home. And so then I thought, okay, what's it going to take to run this? And so then I started looking into renting GPU-based units with AWS, just again, to get hands-on experience with this. And I found out that that would cost $1,000 an hour, which, okay, if you're like doing 3 hours, that's $3,000. You can buy a MacBook for that. And so some experimentation ensued to the point where now I'm very comfortable deploying any size model however I want over some type of API. But the thought process was, I'm not just going to entertain this immediately until the value is proven. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah,
And this is also why I think a lot of NFT, Web3, crypto, blockchain, there's value there, but the addressable market for this value, to speak capitalist, is not as wide, right? It helps people securely send money or like track where your food comes from on the blockchain. But in terms of value by virtue of solving real problems for real people, the surface area just isn't there. And I do believe that's why it didn't catch on as much as AI catches on, because like the potential for problem solving and bettering the world is just broader. So
yeah, and I mean, there's applications that always work. Like, I mean, the whole blockchain thing worked in the finance market for years now, and actually, it helped when the hype got away. It helped when the hype was not there anymore. Then people can do their job. I mean, we had on the show here, we had people that actually are using machine learning to find leaks in oil pipelines. We have later on a person from Neo4j here who actually does the databases and shows how to GraphRAG makes it easier to get your own LLMs to a smaller size that you can use them in your own production kind of stuff. So there's always this happening, but I just the noise and the distraction out there is just driving me bonkers. I think, Dan, you agree with that as well. Like, we're getting a model fatigue to a degree.
Yeah, the right answer is ignore most of it. Like I think another example of model fatigue, I like this term, is even AI vendors like OpenAI with ChatGPT, or even Perplexity, even Cursor, anything that allows you to choose models now just has like a little field that defaults to auto, where the application itself will choose the model for you, because this is such a pain in the butt. You don't want to have to think of, oh, should I talk to 4.0 mini? Should I talk to 4.1? I don't care. I just want my problem solved. And I think that's the right move, is to just look, all of this noise, go away, give me some signal.
Yeah, I feel like the idea of having a marketplace where you can sell models that you trained yourself has not taken on. That seems to be like, that was the first round of iteration of like how you can make money as a developer with AI, but I don't see people doing it.
Yeah, the answer is, I think, MCP, actually, because MCP is extremely lightweight to develop. You don't need millions of GPU. It's a server and client, right? You can make this with Express, and so I think that's it for all the developers, especially web developers who are concerned with losing their jobs. I think MCP is a great progression, because everyone's going to need an MCP server if AI assistants take off the way that we're anticipating. And so if you're a web developer, the path from building websites the next step is not to train your own model and share it. It's to create your own MCP server and share it, and extend the capabilities of AI assistants.
Well, the other thing that's happening right now, of course, is that everybody comes up with their own editor. You got Firebase Studio. We got WordPress now has an AI-powered website builder, which is an interesting one, because I thought that was what WordPress is. Then you had Canva has image generation, interactive coding, spreadsheets, and more. And and all of them are making their own stuff. I'm confused about this. I mean, you were one of the people that went on stage and showed and talked about Cursor and stuff. And I like my VS Code. Why don't I get a plugin? Like, is it just that people want to lock you into their environment because they put that? Because I think the Firebase Studio is just the IDX project from Google rebranded, right?
Yeah, I don't know much about Firebase Studio because I don't leave Cursor, and this is very much by choice. I think why no plugin is a great question. And by the way, I never got into IDX or Firebase because it's super gate kept here in Europe. I just couldn't, like, even Gemini, I couldn't use Gemini for months because of European bureaucracy, which may be with merit. In any case, I think the question of why no extension is a very good one, because there are extensions. For example, ZenCoder it's a VS Code extension that competes with Cursor, which is a VS Code fork. And you might be asking, like, why not extension and why fork? I have no idea. I think your take on, is it to lock you in? Maybe cynical, but also true. I don't know. I do use Cursor as my daily driver because of the amount of polish it has. It's just the user experience and the user interface is perfect, actually. And I've used other editors like Windsurf, Zencoder. They're lacking. They're lacking in polish. For example, overflow issues in the UI. Like you hover over something, you get a tooltip, but the tooltip is under another panel because of Z-index or something like this. And this may be the reason to have a fork, is because you can edit more than just your little extension panel. You can edit the entire thing end to end. And so I think maybe that's why, is to escape some of the limitations that you have from just an extension. Yeah.
Dan, what about you?
So,
What's your daily driver now?
I'm on Cursor as well, and I think it's generally, I mean, I did try Bolt as well, and I actually got really, really bad results from it. Like, I was shocked at how bad what I got was, and I sort of thought, well, it can't be the prompts, because I've given the same prompt to Cursor and got a very good response. So maybe that's just me. I at that point I kind of jumped ship. But I would say I actually gave the Firebase Studio a go, and I don't know, I'm left feeling a little bit like some of these are pitched very strangely, in that they're, Firebase Studio, so you'd assume you're trying to get developers to then use Firebase, and maybe you want to abstract away some of the complexity, give them a UI, they can use natural language. Yes, it will create a quite basic UI, even with some, I was quite impressed actually with some of the description that you can do, in that it will take your prompt and then it will kind of try to organize it and say, well, is this the layout that you'd like? Is this the color scheme that you'd like? Is this the structure on the page? So you can kind of confirm those things beforehand. So you think, oh, I'm going to get a really nice response here. And then I got a very, 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 very basic UI that wasn't very good. Now, the thing was, I thought that's great for somebody who's almost using it as an entry to vibe coding. I just want to make something, and it was saying create a tip calculator app, things like that might be useful. But for a developer, you get given the code, and you could, I suppose, copy and paste it out or deploy straight from there. But because it abstracts it away, you feel like, well, this isn't getting me into Firebase. It's just being another tool I can create a UI with. And if I'm a vibe coder who doesn't want to learn to code, then I don't really care about Firebase. I just want to make the thing. So I feel that it's kind of falling in that gap in the middle, where I'm like, who's this for? It's great fun to play with. It looks great. I love the UI. I love the scrolling. It's very like, oh, this feels nice. But what's the point? Was kind of what I was left with. It's all, the substance is a little bit, I'm not quite sure who this is for. That was my take on it. But yeah, I might sound like a cynic.
I mean, GitHub Copilot now has this agent mode in there as well. So that's actually inside my VS Code as well. So that's probably my issue, because I work for Microsoft. I got GitHub Copilot for free from the very beginning, and I talked about it a bit on public. So they kept giving me updates and insights. So it feels like that. But I think another good advice for every developer out there is not just chase the next editor, but find one that you're actually happy with, and then see what you can build with it, rather than just focus on rearranging your panes. It's a bit like when people talk about their terminal and dot files. Basically, how do you specify your terminal? We had this earlier as well. My terminal is just plain how it came with OS X. I didn't do anything to it because I know Linux. So basically, I don't care what the thing looks like. I just use it to run commands, rather than just do something in the whole day in my thing. But it's interesting when you talked about Z-index, because I love that from Manuel Matuzovic the other day, where there's now an infinity keyword in CSS. So you can do calc infinity multiplied by 1 pixel, and that means you will always have the highest in the Z-index. And it's interesting. I love how it's obviously a joke, but he went all in for it. And
very well. It took me to the end.
I think this is another thing that most developers struggle with, rightfully so. But you don't even need Z-index really if you're intelligent about your stacking context. This is something vibe coders will never get, right? Because it's so deep. But if you just position your element under another element, it will be on top of it. And so Z-index really is a workaround for poor semantic HTML. And maybe that's a hot take, I don't know, but I honestly never had to lean on Z-index for a long time, because I just know things that are on top also come under in the code. They come lower in the code. And so I just want to voice that, like, hey, if you're using Z-index, there may be other ways.
Yeah, I think the only times when you have fixed elements or when you have full overlays, and you're building a full overlay in an environment that you don't own, like ads and these kind of things. So that's where it became interesting. But yeah, set index abuse, especially when you get into like 3 digits or 4 digits, basically shows to me that you have not cared about CSS, and you basically, it's a bit like putting important on everything, like, and then hoping it works. So that's the other thing that people keep doing. Another interesting one that I found, is it really something we need to fix, is localhost domains. So what you can do is actually, I mean, when you run your local your app locally, you have a localhost .1337.80.80 whatever, and you basically, you can set your caddy file a reverse proxy to localhost, and then you have a .localhost domain. Fun, but I mean, I don't see it, because normally you just run your build and then it opens the browser for you anyway. So I think I never typed in localhost for years now.
Yeah, I think like I like typing in localhost. I like never once in my entire life was I like, oh, you know what would be awesome if I have. However, you need a top level domain to have a TLS certificate locally. And I've been part of teams where you have to work in a secure environment even on localhost, which that's a whole nother can of worms. Why? And I think honestly that may be not necessary, but you may have that constraint. And in this case, it makes sense, because what a lot of folks will do is like local.dev, and they'll edit their hosts file to rewrite this to their IP address, their 127.0.0.1, similar to here in your example in the blog post. But so I think there's a case for that makes it more explicit that .localhost aliases to a local IP instead of like .dev aliasing to a local IP. But I think honestly this is overkill if you ask me.
Yeah, it seems to be like, I mean, if you have that many local hosts running, then again, I mean, at one time I was leading a team and I had like 18 projects that I had to look after, and they were all in different languages. So basically I had like so many things on my own machine, it made no sense any longer. So just use a cloud for that, or use a Docker container somewhere. That makes more sense to actually do these kind of things. But it's cute that you can do these kind of things. Then again, I think misconfiguring that might also give you a good opportunity to actually get people from the outside to access your machine. So much like tunneling allows you to do. So that's the other worry there. Yeah, one thing I found pretty interesting about this one is as well, when you take a look at like people's vibe code posts on social media, when people are like, oh, I wrote this thing in 3 minutes. What's the address? And it's localhost 3000. And they just copied and pasted the localhost in there and asked people to watch it on the internet. And you're like, yeah.
Or even more diabolical, some people say, hey, I coded this product in, like a day, 3 days, something like this. And people go use it and then it gets hacked. Did you see this? This happens so often that these things just get hacked. And then the founders or the authors of these products go like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. Okay, I'm shutting it down. That happened, I think, like 3 times in the last couple of weeks.
Shocking that untested code going live is a bad idea. I don't know why. This is odd. Like, I mean, you had a good tweet about vibe coding, Dan, the other day. What was your way to put it?
I effectively just said, like, anyone who says that kind of thing of like, I built this, whatever it is, in 12 hours, it's like an instant block, because I know that, I mean, I can see now that really that is the marketing. It's just a, it's a lot of this, the amount of times I've seen insert name of platform here is cooked, like Netflix is cooked because look, I've made an alternative to it. We can all go and make a Netflix clone on our computer. We're not going to compete with them. There's a lot more to Netflix, for example, than a website. But the point is, you're seeing people kind of doing it as it's almost rage bait to a degree. It's almost like designed, I think, to annoy programmers who know that this isn't true. But it's that crossover again between the development niche and then the mainstream, somebody who's not in development. That post will break out of our little niche, and it will land on the feeds of the average person, who then says, oh my God, this is amazing. And then they go and sign up to the tool, or they get, kind of lured in by it, or they start thinking they can do the same. And so I just think it's all really disingenuous. We all know it isn't accurate. Like, we know it's not, they know it's not, but they will commit to it because it is the marketing for the tool that they've made that day, and it's disposable. So like you say, if there's problems with it, fine, I'll shut it down, I'll just make another one, because everything feels completely disposable, and it just feels quite dishonest, really. It encourages people to be quite dishonest. That's what I'm seeing anyway.
It feels inflationary as well. Like, I mean, it started with like, okay, use our tool and you can publish to the cloud in like 3 clicks. And then it was like, do this boot camp and you're going to get $200,000 salary tomorrow. And now it's like, you don't even need to get a education anymore. Just click these 3 things together and you probably can make millions of money. And that brings me to the last thing that we're going to probably cover, because you said you want to have something. And that's Fireship on YouTube. I was a big fan of Fireship. I still kind of am, but it's driving me crazy. It's like this 1-minute thing with like 6,000 memes in it. He has the right information, but it just I'm not a squirrel. It feels like, is it made for people that actually have an attention span for 2 seconds? But it seems it's working. I mean, Tejas, you doing a lot of stuff online as well. How do you feel about this? Or do you feel like I just don't want to go down the same route, no matter what how successful it is?
Yeah, no, I love Fireship. I think it's a really great tool, because like I think this is what people want is so my take is everybody's overwhelmed. You said this earlier, Chris. There's just a lot of nonsense. If we think like engineers, signal to noise, there's way too much noise. And it's really hard to glean signal. There's way too many people saying, you're not going to make it if you don't this, or Netflix is cooked, or whatever. And honestly, I just want signal. I just want, give me the highlights, the things that I shouldn't miss, and then make them make sense. And so Fireship, I think, does that. And they do that with humor and memes. And so I think that's extremely valuable. In fact, I think, what's his name? Taylor, Alex, whoever is the person behind Fireship, is just really good at that, is making slides, because really it's just slides with text and hilarious memes. No, I think they do a great job, and I think honestly that's a job that not many people can do. It requires taste, and I think this is also the great differentiator. If you're worried about AI taking your job, then taste is what protects you, and it's the combination of taste and skill that protects you. And I think if we talk about Fireship, it marries taste and skill very well. They will tastefully give you 2-minute videos on things you need to, on signal from yesterday's noise, which I think is quite valuable.
Yeah, because it started more like a tutorial course, and I found that actually back then it was more my alley. Doesn't have to be. I'm old and spent, and I could go on vacation already. So, but I think that's a very good point, that you basically, it brings the signal to the noise of yesterday. So. And speaking of taste, you wanted to have a lunch break, so was very happy that you were here. Are you going to be at the Congress as well in July?
I would love to. I mean, it's in my home city, and I get to meet you, Chris, and a bunch of great folks. I think Francesco was there last year. I don't know if he's going to be there this year, but no, absolutely look forward to it. So
cool. Well, thanks very much. This was Tejas Kumar. And any last words for people out there?
Hey, I just
don't buy my book.
Genuinely, just thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me be a part of this. It was great fun, as always, Chris, to talk to you, Dan, and I look forward to doing it again. So thank you.
Cool. See you soon.
Take care. Bye.
And with this, we're going to bring another professional in here, and he's now cleaning up his face and everything before we put him on stage. We've got Martin O'Hanlon here from Neo4j, and he is not having his microphone on, which is helpful if you speak. Yay!
Hi, thank you. It's very, very nice to be here. I was backstage like a good person, and I had my mic on mute. But yes, no, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Chris.
How are you doing?
Yes, I am very well, thank you. Yeah. It's a grey day here in the UK, but that's good for lighting coming through the window. So
Nice. Yeah. We had yesterday. We all were wearing plaid shirts, and we basically were like Gingham, and we were saying like, "Oh, this is not happening." And now here you're in hoodie, back in developer mode. And today we all had 3 black shirts with Tejas as well. So that was really bizarre. But we gotta be better at that. We need we need an advisor to help us with these kind of things.
Let's coordinate next time.
Yeah. Anyways. So you're going to talk to us today about GenAI and Graph.
Graphs. Yeah. So we are going to talk today. So like over the past couple of years since the most recent generation of sort of, like the generative AI models have come up. The words GenAI, graph, knowledge graph, RAG, GraphRAG have all like come to merge together, and we talk about them in unison. So I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about all of those things and see whether we can build some relationships between all of those things, and see how they relate.
Cool. So I guess without further ado, we hand you over to your slides, and we're going to be drooling and like picking our noses and stuff and distracting you in every way backstage. And stage is yours. Make LLMs make sense with GraphRAG.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to sort my screens out, put everything in the right place so I can see everything. Great. Like I say, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, if I'm going to caption this talk, it is make LLMs make sense with GraphRAG. And we'll talk about all of those words. So first off, like graphs and GenAI, they help each other, and if there's anything that I want people to leave with after listening to me talk for 20 minutes is just sort of seeing the relationship between those two things, because I don't know if you've ever noticed, but like LLMs aren't perfect. And when I talk about LLMs, I'm talking about generative AI or text generating Gen AI models. So your GPT-4s, your Claudes, your Llamas, your DeepSeeks, your insert name of generative AI model here. LLMs aren't perfect. And like, I don't know if you've ever been in the situation, I certainly have, where, I'm faced against this challenge. And maybe it's something that's, I don't know, laborious task, or it's a sort of a job that I'm not particularly au fait with, and I've been explaining it to somebody, and they've just gone, do you know what? Like ChatGPT, dude, just put in ChatGPT, let it do the work for you. And they are fantastic productivity tools and fantastic tools for generating human-like text, and have a huge amount of potential for just making our lives that little bit easier. Never a bad thing. But if you use them for any length of time, you will find yourself in this situation. Like, just like, what? Like, the thing that you've told me doesn't make sense, or it's inaccurate. And I know that for a fact, right? Why are you doing that? But it presents it as true, because like LLMs make things up. And when they do, we refer to it as a hallucination. I think, this word hallucination has become well known. They hallucinate. But if we think about what a hallucination is, it is a statement presented as true, right? Believed to be true. It's something that's been hallucinated, right? And it's stated as fact. And it's often difficult to pick out what is true and what is not. I love a live demo because I'm a sucker for punishment. But what I want to do is I just want to just sort of go through a really sort of simple demonstration of what I mean by this. So this is OpenAI's Playground. It is a great tool if you use OpenAI's models. It allows you to interact with models directly. I happen to be using GPT-4. It doesn't really matter which one we use for this demo, but it allows you to tweak certain features as well. But what it allows me to do is send a prompt to the LLM and get a response back, and which is exactly what I'm going to do. And I'm going to ask it a relatively simple question because I want to use this as an opportunity to demonstrate something. So I'm going to ask it, what's the weather? And it's going to respond to me with saying, sorry, as an AI developed model, I don't have real-time capabilities, and it gives me a recommendation. So this for me demonstrates two key reasons why large language models or generative AI models may hallucinate. So the first one is, and this is a great example of that, is it only has access to data right up until the point it was released, it was trained. They are immediately out of date. And it also only has access to data that it was trained on. typically public domain data. So if you've got private data, it's not going to have access to that. So it will, it's not going to fill in the gaps when it doesn't have data. It's just because it doesn't have that data. It doesn't even know there are gaps. But if I ask it, what's the weather? It's going to say, I don't know. I don't know. And it represents those two issues, which is it doesn't have access to data. But it has at least come back with a response that makes sense, right? So I'm just going to change that, and I'm going to introduce a prompt. So I'm going to introduce a system message. Now, system messages are messages that are sent alongside every prompt. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm tagging this, you are a surfer dude having conversations about surf conditions on the beach, respond using surfer slang. So I'm tagging that to every question that I put to the LLM. But I'm going to ask it the same question. What's the weather? And I'm going to get back a response. Dude, the sun's out in full force. It's scoring like an 8 on the Stoke meter. Glassy sessions are lined up today for primo conditions. Right. It has provided me a human-like response, which is its job, to the question that I have asked it. However, it is absolutely made up. The sun's out in force. It may be where you are. It's definitely not here. It's scoring an 8. I mean, I've no idea what that means. Glassy sessions could be, but it probably isn't. This is completely made up. However, it is presented as fact. It is an hallucination, because if we go right back to the basics of what this model is doing, it is taking you're a surfer dude, it's taking what is the weather, and it's effectively continuing the text based on that. And that is a suitable response, albeit completely made up. But right, we can help ourselves in this. So let's try and improve this. So I'm just going to change my system prompt, and I'm going to include some additional information that tells it what the weather is. Current weather, it's calm, 3 feet waves, and it's cloudy. And I can ask it the same question: what's the weather? And I get back a response. It's pretty mellow out there, knee-high sets, 3 feet waves, a bit of grey soup in the sky, cloudy. It has provided me a human-like response that meets my requirements, but this time it is based in fact, assuming the information it's been given. And I can go further than that. So rather than just a simple sort of summary of what the weather is, I can include a surf report. So a piece of JSON that says you're a surfer dude. What's happening at Fistral. Fistral, if you don't know, is a beach in the UK, in Cornwall. What's happening at Fistral? Dude, Fistral's got gnarly 6-foot towering beast and offshore winds. Again, it's presented me with something which is now factually correct based on the information that it has been given. And again, it's used that information and it's used that prompt to create some human-like text. Okay, so let's just nip back to here. So, if you haven't seen this kind of approach before, it's called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. RAG is an architecture, a pattern, however you want to describe it. I kind of actually prefer GAR rather than RAG. The reason being is I think it's easier to explain. Because what I'm doing here is I'm instructing an LLM to generate some text, a surfer on the beach responding to conditions that has been augmented or improved. So in this case, I've augmented it with some weather conditions or some surf conditions that by the retrieval of additional information. Now I gave it those that piece of JSON, but we can imagine that being obtained from an API or some other source. And that's what RAG is. It is providing additional information that allows our LLM to create that human-like text, which is based in fact. And going back to knowledge graphs for a moment, the reason that generative AI and knowledge graphs have been sort of paired together. If I'm going to use the analogy, it's going to be the sort of left brain, right brain analogy. So, our LLMs are incredibly good at language, reasoning, creativity, coming up with responses, but are less good at knowledge, context, and enrichment. That's our job is to give that to them. And, as we've been going on this journey, what we've found is that knowledge graphs are a really great way of providing that left brain. So knowledge, context, and enrichment to our LLMs, which are really good at the other stuff. Okay, so let's think about how like I need to just take us all back for a second and just cover off some words. So we've been talking about knowledge graphs, but what are graphs? Let's just sort of make sure everybody's on the same level. So first off, I don't mean these, right? Before I worked for Neo4j, when somebody said graph to me, I thought of these. I tend to refer to these as charts now. But yeah, I don't mean graphs. What I mean is graph theory. So edges and vertices, nodes and relationships, circles and lines. What we're talking about here is the relationships between entities, how data is connected. And Neo4j is a graph database, and if we just spend a little bit of time talking about, well, actually, how do you store data within a graph? So the first thing to note is that data is stored as nodes, and nodes represent things. In this case, this thing happens to be the movie Toy Story, but it could be a laptop, a monitor, a house, something abstract, an event, but they represent things, and we use labels to categorize nodes. So let's say we had 1,000 movies. They would all have their own node, and we would categorize them. We would group them together using labels, and we can have more than one label. So Toy Story is a movie, is also an animated movie. And the way that we store data in graphs is by having properties. So nodes can have properties, as key value pairs. So in this case, the title of this node, the title property for this node is Toy Story, and it was released in 1995. But the power of graphs comes from how do we make connections between data? So let's say we have two nodes. We have the movie Toy Story, and we have the actor Tom Hanks. There is a relationship between those two nodes, and that relationship is Tom Hanks acted in the movie Toy Story, and we define relationships with types. And one of the interesting things about graphs and about how we manage data in a graph is that relationships are, for want of a better word or a better phrase, real things. And as such, we can also store properties against them. So in this case, Tom Hanks, the actor, acted in the movie Toy Story as under the role of Woody. And that's how we kind of represent data within graphs. I've lost my mouse. And graphs are everywhere. So we see graphs everywhere, from bills of materials to relationships within businesses, hierarchies, network and security management. Everywhere, anywhere where there is highly connected entities and data, you can typically express that as a graph. And really typical use cases, things like product recommendations, anti-money laundering, and subsection of that are knowledge graphs. And what knowledge graphs allow us to do is to understand the relationships typically between entities and things. So all of this effectively comes down to graph databases are designed to efficiently store and store and query networks of nodes and relationships, understanding how data is connected, rather than just storing huge amounts of data. It's the connections that are as important as the data itself. Okay, so we've got a pretty good basis of graphs. Let's go back to retrieval augmented generation and have a look at how actually graphs can support us in, providing context to our, generative AI applications. So I think this is about the simplest architecture diagram I can draw for a generative AI application. So I have a user generates some input, a question. There is an application that has a prompt. The user's input and the prompt are meshed together, put together, sent to the large language model, and the response is passed all the way back. And very simply, when I did my surfer example, that's kind of what I was doing. I provided a prompt, I got some user input, and I sent that, and then I got a response back. But what we saw was the addition of context allows our applications to be more useful. Context being information that will allow the LLM to create a better response, right? And we have two things in order to be able to generate our context. We have the application's purpose, so what it's there to do. Is it there to talk about financial transactions in a bank? Is it there to talk about surf conditions? Is it there to help find documentation for a particular product? So we have the context of what the application does, and then we also have the user's input. And our job is to take that user's input and find the best data that we can provide as context in order to be able to give the large language model the information it needs to provide a good and accurate response. And a really typical way of doing that is through vector embeddings. So vector embeddings being, a mathematical representation, in this case of text, but of data. And we can use those vector embeddings to say, okay, well, I've got the user's input. If I create an embedding for that, find me the most similar data that kind of represents what the user's asking for. And vectors work incredibly well for when you are looking for sort of fuzzy matching, when you're sort of trying to find information that may be vague or open-ended. The example I've used here is, what does Paul Graham think about generative AI? And where vectors work really, really well. So let's say our data source is, a repository of AI blog posts, and we can use that input. What does Paul Graham think about generative AI? Use that repository of AI blog posts, find the ones that are most similar to the question that's being asked, provide that as context to our LLM, and we can create a decent context that allows our LLM to produce a response. However, vectors are ineffective for highly specific fact-based questions. So in this case, how many generative AI startups has Paul Graham invested in? So I'm looking for a number. I'm looking for a specific, value. And while that specific value may be in one of our data sources, one of our unstructured data sources, it's going to be difficult for the LLM to pick out the right number, or maybe it needs to do some addition to sum up some values, and that's where vectors fall down. And particularly, if we other aspects of things like specialist knowledge, when you're looking for something specific, you're not looking for that kind of fuzzy match. You're looking for something very, very, very specific. So if we go back to our architecture diagram, a way that we can help fill that gap, or a way that we can fill that gap, is through knowledge graphs. Again, connected data, allowing us to find facts about the information that we have been given. And I like this example. She's just a small town girl living in a lonely world. If I'm going to look to map that as a knowledge graph, I can use entities such as people, events, and locations. Small town boy took a midnight train going to location anywhere, was born and raised in South Detroit. So I can create a factual representation of unstructured data. that's going to allow me to gain more specific answers to the questions that I'm looking for. Okay. Hopefully, what we've started to see here is that if we're looking to provide information to our LLM to provide good responses, context is key. So here is a review, right? And this is a piece of text which is I think Neo4j is a great place to work. It's a review from a job site, and if we were to provide that as context to our LLM, a typical response would be, according to the provided context, Neo4j is a great place to work. I would like to prefix all of this with, I truly believe that Neo4j is a great place to work. But context is key. So let's sort of build that into a graph. So if that review was posted by a person who has the username Emil Efren, Emil Efren works at Neo4j. I know that Emil's my boss. In fact, Emil is my boss's boss's boss. So context is key, and providing our context through using GraphRAG, and by complementing whatever data we have with facts that we have from our knowledge graph, we can provide a better response. According to Emil Efren, the CEO, Neo4j is a great place to work. Right? Context is key. So let's just hop back to OpenAI, and we will look at another sort of demonstration. So I'm going to keep the same context that I had before. You're a surfer dude having a conversation about surf conditions. It's got exactly the same context. But I'm going to ask it a different question. So more I surf today. And it's going to use that context to provide me with some information that is based in the context that it has. So, dude, gnarly swells at Fistral, bro. We've got 6 feet waves with offshore winds, flat and calm. Fistral's the place to be. It is making a strong recommendation that 6 foot waves are better than 3, which they are. Offshore winds, good, fine. Go to Fistral. However, there could be very well context that we are missing here. And that's kind of what I want to do, is I want to add to this some context that I could get from a knowledge graph. So the context I'm going to add is data that we got about that we gained from our knowledge graph. This is a graph pattern. The parentheses represent nodes. The arrows and square brackets represent relationships. So in this, we can see there is a beach node that has the name of Fistral, and there is a relationship to a status that says Fistral is closed today. And there's also some additional information that says that Polzeth has an event later on where there is a party. So we have added some additional context through our knowledge graph. And again, I want to ask it the same question. Where should I surf today? Okay, so, well, dude, looks like Fistral's got some gnarly 6 feet waves, but it is closed today. However, Polzeth is flat and chill, but we've got a party cooking up later, so maybe that's the right place for you. So if you're up to some mellow action, Watergate Bay is where you should be paddling out. So it has used the additional context, the fact-based relationships to create a more specific, arguably better answer. And that's where GraphRAG comes in. It's about using graphs to generate facts that allow you to provide a better context. Okay, share this tab instead. So I just kind of wanted to finish off with, we talk a lot about GraphRAG, and for me, it falls into 2 very discrete things. So the first one is extracting entities and relationships from unstructured text. If you have a graph, or if you have good metadata that describes your context, you should use it and build a graph from it. You'll be able to query it quickly. You'll be able to understand those relationships. However, what you can also do with generative AI models is actually you can create your own knowledge graph from unstructured text. A small plug for Neo4j, there is a great tool called the LLM Graph Builder. which you can use to do exactly that. Provide it with some unstructured text, and it will create a knowledge graph for you. The second one is what we have been looking at, and the small demos that I've done is using relationships to provide context and answer questions, to provide better responses. Okay, so right back to the start, graphs and GenAI. Like, why? Graphs are a really good way of providing context to your generative AI applications, and you can use generative AI as a way of generating your graphs to complete that cycle and to provide better context. All right, so thank you. I have enjoyed talking to you. I'm very pleased all the demos worked. Yeah, thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have.
No, I did it there, Martin. I came on muted as well. So just waiting for Chris's camera to come back.
Chris,
it's taking a second. There he is. There he is.
That was amazing. That was good. I mean, it was painful to hear that surfer text, but at the same time, it was interesting to see. So, where do you see this going? Like the idea of storing data in graphs rather than like in static files, like or in structured databases like relational databases and these kind of things, seems to be a newer part that we're going to right now. Is it because it is basically is it a simplicity thing, or is it something that people stay with the old formats, or is it just harder to actually set up your own vector database and your own graph databases?
There are lots of questions there. Let's sort of rewind. Where do I think this goes? I think we are only really on the sort of cusp of starting to see the introduction of, I'm going to call them mass market generative AI applications. We've had ChatGPT for a long time, but your financial services organization or your industrial sector customers haven't been using that. There's been a lot of tests, and actually the thing that I see is a sort of exponential increase of those of those use cases taking advantage of this technology. It takes a long time for this stuff to roll in and embed. In terms of like why graph, right? I work for the FJ. I genuinely believe graphs are a great tool to help you achieve your goals. Why graphs for this use case? I think there are a couple of reasons. Like, first of all, if you're looking to understand the relationships between data, your traditional relational databases are going to run out of steam very quickly, particularly when you have cyclic references, and that's where a graph's going to deliver you a lot of performance. LLMs are already slow. We don't want to have a data layer that's also slow. Yeah, and I also think just more. I'm going to use the word philosophically. I don't think that's the right word, but more thinking philosophically. Describing your relationships in a graph using that noun, verb, noun, actually supports the generative AI use cases, particularly LLMs, in taking on board that context. So beach fistral is closed, right? Rather, you could construct that from a typical relational database, but it comes out in that format. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What does this say about kind of search and things like this? Because I think it's really interesting when I saw your presentation, because it's doing something about accuracy, and we know that's a huge issue with sort of AI in general, especially for enterprise organizations where that that information being correct, as you said. But I don't know. I sort of wonder what the how does it fit in with sort of search, in that when we've got these new search functionality in sort of things like ChatGPT, it's that idea that we're going to try and go to this external sources, and we'll show you these external sources and bring them back. Does the GraphRAG kind of approach sort of say, well, that's unreliable, and so we need an internal approach? Or does it ever find a way of merging the two? I mean, how does that sort of work?
Yeah, so I think it highly depends on the question you are asking, and I think I would never be a proponent of only use one technology over over another. Yeah, if we're looking at GraphRAG as a solution, I think graph plus vector is a very, very good model, right? I'm also a big fan of full text search plus vector search plus RAG as a really good choice, because actually we're looking for different things. If I'm looking, let's say I want to do a fuzzy search for a company's name, yeah, a vector embedding is not going to help me do that. It's not going to help me find that semantic meaning. A full text search will, right? Yeah. If I'm looking for the number of, I don't know, the number of accounts that a company holds, yeah, a vector search is probably going to yield significantly less accurate results than searching a graph. Yeah. So like use them all, right? Understand your use case, use the technology, the technology that fits. And I create generative AI applications. Most of my work is creating educational material. I create generative AI applications as part of my work. And vector plus graph, perfect. Yeah.
It's interesting that you showed movies as the example, because Netflix is now moving to a search that is AI powered. And it will be interesting to see, because it had some very, very bad false positives at times when you were looking for genre movies. And it's like, yeah, this one uses black and white, so this one uses black and white, so they must be the same movie, right?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I think there's a... if I could do a small plug for my work, so the movie data set is a data set that we use a lot as part of our online training courses. That's mostly what I do. Is I create educational content and deliver workshops and things like that. And one of our courses is creating a movie recommendation chatbot that uses vector search against movie plots. So find me a movie about aliens landing on Earth. Yeah. Plus graph in order to say, find me a movie about aliens landing on Earth, which is in the genre dark noir. I don't know. Yeah. And again, where we do that, where we do exactly that, we use that vector search and we use the graph to kind of supplement that data as well.
Yeah. Do you know why Titanic and Sixth Sense the same movie?
No, it feels like the start of like the start of a joke. I hope it is.
I see dead people.
I have never heard that. Well done. I feel like there's a part of my life that's been missing up until now.
Yeah. I feel like once a week when I hear one of these jokes.
Yeah.
So that was great. Are these slides available somewhere, or is it more like, I mean, there's not that much information in them, but can you point to an article that we can point people to see the same information, or do they have to watch the video?
They can watch the video. However, what I would say is that everything I have done today is an abridged version of content that already exists for Neo4j on our Graph Academy site. So if you go to graphacademy.neo4j.com, there is a great course called Neo4j and LLM Fundamentals, goes through these things.
Cool. Are you going to be at the Congress in Berlin?
I will. Yes, I will be at the Congress in Berlin. I'm looking forward to it. It being my third year in a row. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, it'd be great to see everybody. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess if there's anything else you want to cover, if not, we can give people some time back and we can start cutting your video and we send it out in a newsletter on Friday. So that's going to be fun to see.
Oh, and honestly, it has been absolutely excellent. I've enjoyed talking to you, and thank you very much for inviting me as well.
And live from the shed, this was Martin O'Hanlon from Neo4j. we talked about in the test yesterday about like YouTube channels that we follow and these kind of things. And I love that beta.com, the meme site from England. At one time, somebody posted a calendar of sheds in England. Like there's a Shed of the Year award every year, and I didn't know that existed, and it became this huge thing. Like this basically Sheds of England. This every year is like a big thing where like thousands of people from that mailing list actually get cast their vote without even having seen the shed, but it seems to be like an anorak thing in England to do.
And there is a really beautiful charity in the UK called Men's Sheds, which supports men's mental health, and it was a way of connecting men together. I did a little talk for them talking about sheds, and I created this, which is a shed status board. So,
That's amazing.
Yeah. I'm your first customer. If you haven't got any yet, I'm your first one.
No,
I want one of those.
I don't have any. Dan, I tell you what, I'll come to the Congress. I will bring this with me, and you can have it.
Done deal. Thank you very much.
That's a deal. Thank you very much, Martin O'Hanlon. And this was WeAreDevelopers Live for today, 16th of April. We're getting closer to the event, and we're getting closer to our other things. I want to plug a thing that in June, on the 5th of June, we're going to have an accessibility live day. So I'm still looking for speakers, and I'm emailing people left and right. So if you know somebody that you would want to see at an accessibility live day, send me a letter at chris@wearedevelopers.com. And in general, thanks for watching, and we see you soon next Wednesday. Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Dan. This was great.
Bye.
Thank you.